This is Summerlin, one of the most beautiful areas of Las Vegas, and yet it was originally intended by the developer as an industrial estate. What really happened to Howard Hughes? We'll take a closer look at the mysterious disappearance and the remarkable last few years of this illustrious Las Vegas resident. I'm Peter J. Shield. Welcome to my world of unexplained mysteries, Vegas style. Howard Hughes is most famous for the last few years of his life, when his mind faded and he lived the life of a wealthy, paranoid recluse. But earlier, he had been a dashing and innovative businessman, inheriting the Hughes Tool Company at age 19. Hughes became, by turns, a Hollywood movie producer, an aircraft inventor, a mining mogul, an avid pilot. He set a handful of world records, including his 1938 flight around the world in just over 91 hours, and, of course, a casino owner. In the 1960s, his business dealings paid off handsomely, and his wealth reached $1 billion. At the same time, certain personality quirks began to dominate, and he grew increasingly unbalanced. He dropped from public view and became famous for his wealth and his mysterious hidden ways. Surfacing via telephone in 1972 to say that a biography written by Clifford Irving was a hoax, the gossip and confusion about his whereabouts and lifestyle continued after his 1976 death, when various parties contested his will amid much publicized legal wrangling. His death in 1976 with no discoverable will triggered a bitter struggle by thousands of people to claim his $2 billion fortune, later, by the way, shown to be in excess of $6 billion. Two powerful groups led the contenders. On the one side was Will Loomis, a cousin of the billionaire, along with 20 other cousins claiming legal heirship, while on the other side were the people led by Chester Davis, who had managed the empire of Howard Hughes for the last 6 years of his life. True ownership of the estate, however, was unknown, nor was it clear where the estate should be properly probated, what it was worth, or what its debts were. Matters were further complicated by numerous forged wills. A $50 million lawsuit launched by Loomis against Chester Davis and the other aides of Hughes accused them of manipulating a sick Hughes to further their personal interests. Accusations that Loomis's law firm had lost or destroyed the Hughes will. Claims by various girlfriends and deeply unresolved federal and state inheritance tax issues. Both Texas and California claimed Howard Hughes as their own resident, of course, which resulted in years of litigation that went several times to the U.S. Supreme Court. The issue was finally resolved, with Texas receiving $50 million and California receiving $119 million. In 1983, after 7 years of litigation, the heirs at law, led by Will Loomis, finally received the first of their inheritance from the estate. Howard Hughes Jr., or Sonny as he was called, was born on December 24th in 1905 in Houston, Texas. He was a quiet, lonely child who was interested in machinery of all sorts. In 1908, Howard Sr. and Walter B. Sharp started the Sharp Hughes Tool Company after inventing an improved drill bit for oil digging. In 1917, Howard Sr. bought out Sharp's interest in the company for $325,000, naming it the Hughes Tool Company. In 1920, Sonny or Howard took flying lessons from a barnstorming pilot, which started his love and passion for flying, and kept the lessons a secret from his parents. He paid for the lessons out of his allowance. After his parents' death, Howard convinced his relatives to sell the Hughes Tool Company to him for $325,000. He was only 19 years old at the time. An interesting account of Howard's first exposure to gambling may explain his eventual migration to Las Vegas. The story, as I recall, goes that Howard went to Europe with Mrs. Walter Sharp, the widow of his father's former partner and mother, by the way, of Howard's only friend. They visited the casinos in Brussels. He spent hours watching the roulette table with a mathematician's eye. On his final night in Brussels, Howard placed a $5 chip on Red to win. Red, of course, won. He let the $10 ride and won again. He began to switch between red and black, consistently winning. As the pile of chips before him mounted, a crowd began to gather. There was $1,000 worth of chips, then $2,000, then $4,000. At $8,000, he reduced his bet and slowly built it up again until his winnings totaled $10,000. At this point, he picked up just one chip worth $10 and placed it on red. The wheel spun, the ball came to rest on black. Howard scooped up the remaining $9,990 and left. It was during this year that he also married Ella Rice, whose family owned the Rice Institute. Howard and Ella moved to Hollywood, California. Hughes was said to be very good-looking and a good golf player. During the 1940s, Hughes was a frequent visitor to Vegas. He also struck up a friendship with Deli Webb. Hughes would give Webb construction jobs, which purportedly earned Webb over $1 billion. In 1951, Hughes' aircraft made $67 million, and in 1952, over $200 million. It appears to be around this time that Hughes became paranoid about germs. Secretaries had to wear plastic gloves while typing and weren't allowed to wear perfume. Hughes also became aware of espionage, since his company was accepting government contracts. His company was also making wiretapping equipment, so Hughes was well aware of how easy it was to spy on anyone. And, by the way, he took appropriate precautions against wiretapping, which he'd experienced firsthand during his Senate subcommittee hearings. Welcome back. Following the summer of 1924, Howard and Ella moved to Hollywood to pursue Howard's interest in making movies. He won an Academy Award for Two Arabian Nights in 1928. The next film, Hell's Angel, made in 1930, written and directed by Hughes, starred Jean Harlow. It was the most expensive movie of its time, at a cost of $3.8 million. This movie, about World War I aviators, lost $1.5 million at the box office, but it allowed Hughes to indulge his interest in flying. While shooting Hell's Angels, Hughes earned his pilot's license. 2 years later, Hughes' films tested the limits of public morality. Scarface in 1932 was censored until Hughes sued to allow its release, and The Outlaw, my favorite, in 1941 became controversial for its sexually explicit advertising and content, both featuring a sensational outfit worn by busty Jane Russell. Inspired by the excitement over The Outlaw, Hughes later took a break from airplane fuselage design to create the half-cupped bra, would you believe, modeled, of course, by his Hollywood discovery, Jane Russell. It was in 1930 that Hughes built the Texas Theater, the movie house in the Oak Cliff section of Dallas in which Lee Harvey Oswald was arrested in 1963. The closeness of both men to the CIA makes it all but certain that the Texas Theater would have become a clandestine meeting place for spies. Such uses of movie theaters had long been a staple of espionage tradecraft, and other Hughes properties were put to similar use. Hughes owned the RKO movie studio from 1948 to 1955. However, no successful films were made, and the studio was losing more and more money every year. In 1954, Hughes sold RKO for $25 million. He kept RKO Radio Pictures and merged it with the Atlas Corporation. A few months later, he bought back from O'Neill the films Jet Pilot, The Conqueror, and of course the original print of The Outlaw for $12 million. It was at this time that Hughes turned his attention to TWA, committing himself to buy 26 jets worth $300 million, with cash he didn't reportedly have. Hughes then bought 27,000 acres of desert on the outskirts of Las Vegas, making him the largest private landowner in Clark County. I'm sure he would have been impressed if he could see Summerlin today. In 1957, at the age of 52, Hughes married 30-year-old actress Jean Peters. During that time, Hughes also started to grow a beard. Some say he was bothered by the scars on his face left by an accident he suffered in 1946. On May 3, 1966, Hughes was given a check for over, are you ready for this, $546 million for the sale of 78% of his TWA stock. This transaction made Hughes the richest man in the world. Hughes loved the Strip of Vegas and always planned one day to move there. It was only logical to go back to the place he considered home, despite the fact that Hughes didn't drink, rarely gambled, and didn't believe in prostitution. What made Vegas attractive to Hughes applies equally to many of us today. No personal or corporate income tax, nor inheritance, franchise, or warehouse taxes. The sales tax at that time was only 3%, and real estate taxes were limited by the state constitution. Gambling taxes paid 30% of the state's bills. Hughes had purchased a home for $625,000, but preferred to live in the 9th floor of the Desert Inn, with his aides living on the 8th. When threatened with eviction, he simply bought the hotel. This was the start of the spending spree, and Hughes' conflict with the mob began. In 1968, Hughes had purchased a CBS affiliate television station, KLAS, for $3.6 million, the North Las Vegas airport, plus adjoining acres of land and a ranch. Between 1966 and 1968, Hughes bought the Desert Inn, the Sands, Castaways, the New Frontier, and the Silver Slipper on the Strip. In Reno, he then bought Harold's Club for $10.5 million. He also bought 503 mining claims, plus options on at least 1,500 others. By mid-1970, it was estimated that Hughes casinos accounted for 17% of Nevada's gambling revenue. At many Las Vegas hotels, casino bosses maintained a list of call girls to cater to high rollers. Hughes quietly sent word to management, pit bosses, bartenders, bellhops, and cocktail waitresses that the girly trade would no longer be allowed on any of his properties. Cocktail waitresses were also expected to entertain big gamblers in more private surroundings if they were asked to do so by the pit bosses. Chorus girls, too, had also been required to sit around the lounges for an hour or two after they finished their work on stage. Hughes changed the rules so that female staff were expected only to mix socially with casino patrons. but they didn't have to do anything beyond a few drinks and pleasant conversation. Hughes was also concerned for his employees at the casinos, including those cocktail waitresses, chambermaids, stagehands, and bartenders who were being paid through his Hughes Tool Company. He wanted to make sure they were being well fed whilst on shift. He told aides that employees should have their choice of foods. He provided free life and health insurance, a pension plan. He wouldn't deal with dissatisfied employees, and he knew happy employees made everyone happy. In 1969, rumors were flying that Hughes was dead. All rumors were discounted, however, when Esquire magazine had pictures of Hughes on its cover stating, "Hughes, we see you." In 1970, after 23 years of marriage, Jean Peters filed for divorce. She asked only $70,000 a year from the billionaire. By 1971, records show that Hughes spent approximately $300 million in Vegas, and over 15% of Nevada's gambling revenue was generated by this man who didn't smoke, drink, or gamble. Hughes employed over 8,000 people with a $50 million a year payroll and a gross of over $500 million. It appears that something happened to Hughes when he realized that his ultimate dream was failing. He left in the early 1970s to live in the Bahamas. By this time, he was suffering from his 1946 accident and very hard of hearing. It was believed Hughes suffered from chronic anemia, which includes retention of excessive amounts of iron, needing periodical blood transfusions, an inability to assimilate red blood byproducts, and skin discoloration. Because of this, Hughes acquired a sensitivity to sunlight. In October of 1970, Hughes was also fighting viral pneumonia. Hughes bought Los Angeles Airways in mid-1970, and by 1971, it had a negative net worth of $3.6 million. The Landmark Hotel lost $5 million in just 1 year. When Hughes left Vegas, Governor Laxalt feared that he was dead. On December 7, 1970, Hughes personally phoned him to tell him he was indeed alive and well in the Bahamas. They also all said he was a recluse. He upset the mob, which isn't always the healthiest thing to do. He was being watched by certain government agencies, and the press, newspapers, and magazines were offering mega dollars to anyone who could get a picture of him. He also was exposed to the constant threat of kidnapping, knowing his people would pay anything to get him back. He suspected that his phones were also tapped during his Senate committee hearings, and he knew all about wiretapping. He also was being chased by TWA, and his medical conditions made him sensitive to sunlight. When looking at the big picture, it's easy to understand why Hughes was a recluse of his own making. There are also rumors that his drug abuse, due to the injuries he suffered in '96, another rumor stated that after Hughes left Las Vegas, because he believed the people who surrounded him were slowly killing him with drugs, and he had lost the world he knew and loved. It seems after he left Vegas, nothing and everything appears to be true. Hughes died on April the 5th, 1976, and was buried at Glenwood Cemetery in Houston, Texas. Hughes turned dreams to reality. Even today, few realize the terrific impact that Howard Hughes had on the city of Las Vegas, and his charitable contributions and dedication to his employees, education, air, space, movies, and medicine have been noted and appreciated through the memories of all involved. His critics thought him foolish, but he proved them wrong in the end. He was right, and history will show what he achieved in his lifetime. He took his money and, together with his courage and determination, made changes that still impact on those of us who now choose Las Vegas as our home. Las Vegas was fortunate to have this self-proclaimed eccentric prove dreams can come true.